All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit. Actually, not, because Chandra is just a big kind of X-ray camera in the sky, right?
Yep.
We're going to come down to visible light, and maybe not quite so far away. Bill Wadman is here. He is a professional photographer specializing in commercial and editorial work, portraiture particularly.
Yep.
And you wowed me because you sent me an email saying, I've done these headshots for some of the people you know, like Andy Anako.
Yeah.
And in fact, can we show some of his headshots again? Because there's just really
Yeah, I know a lot of
stuff.
people that you guys know and work with.
Yeah.
There's a Neil Gaiman there in the green sitting on the
love
chairs.
That.
Yeah, he was a handful. Yeah, so
I bet he was. Baratunde?
Yep, Baratunde's in there.
You know, I mean, Baratunde, you had some of the people we've worked with.
Buzz Aldrin there. Yeah.
Buzz Aldrin, wow.
Yeah. It's funny, part of the thing that I like about doing portrait photography is just meeting the people. There's Ray Kurzweil there.
Oh, neat. So you're a geek, obviously.
Yes, I'm a geek, a long-time geek, yeah.
Yeah, really.
And yeah, part of the great thing about it is that I get to spend 5, 10, 20, 30, sometimes an hour with these people that have been heroes of mine for many years, right? You know, I'm doing it for work, but I get to spend time with them. In some ways, the final photo ends up being an artifact of the experience of hanging out with them.
So what you like, and I think this is the best photographers I know, this is true, you like people.
Yeah.
And the camera is just a device.
Yeah, absolutely.
To get to talk to it.
It's always funny to me that the portrait photographers who aren't good at talking to people or aren't good at interacting with people, and they exist. And I don't know how they get their job done, because, I mean, it's psychology as much as it is anything, right? Yeah.
That is fantastic.
That, by the way, is a seriously massive composite. He was actually sitting on my table. The bottom of the stage is actually the back of a bench in a subway station.
No.
The Dave Hill, I created an Illustrator.
You've ruined this picture.
Sorry, sorry.
I thought he was on stage. That's hysterical.
Yeah, but so yeah, I mean that kind of stuff happens too, right? Where it's a creative thing. You're starting from an idea. You know, a couple hours ago we shot a picture of you, which we don't have yet. This woman was a Olympic gold medalist in judo. There's Kayla Harrison. She won again in most recent games.
Though you make a good point, because the best portraiture draws the person. There's Malcolm Gladwell. Draws the person's personality out. You get a sense of who they are, and that means you have to have a relationship.
Absolutely. And it's funny because sometimes it takes time, right? Depending on the person. Some people are very stiff when you first get in the room, and it takes a little time to sort of wear them down. So they almost
you had me under the desk right away.
Exactly. Yeah. But you know, talking to them and getting them to feel comfortable is a big part of it.
Right.
And so that, as I said, it's a psychological game in some ways.
I couldn't help but notice the camera that you brought. A lot of people in your business will use DSLRs.
Sure.
Canon 5D Mark IV.
I was a Canon guy for many years.
Right.
And last year I switched up to medium format. So this is a Pentax 645Z.
That's a much bigger sensor, right?
This is a sensor. It's about twice the size of what's in a full-frame SLR. It's not quite as big as a piece of 645 film, which is, you know.
Right.
But it is
square.
It's actually not square. This one is 4:3 ratio. Okay. So it is more rectangular, or more closer to square than a traditional full-frame. You know, 35 millimeter is 2:3 ratio.
Right.
So it changes the way you compose stuff and that kind of thing. It also has massive amounts of information, right? This is a 51 megapixel camera.
Wow.
It's got tons of dynamic range. So,
that's the thing that's interesting about these cameras, the dynamic range. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're taking pictures of any particular scene, you're gonna have to deal with the fact that there's bright parts, there's, you know, white, the sky or what have you. And then there's shadows. And in cameras, you can expose for either the shadows or the light or that kind of thing. The big trick is trying to get it so that you get the whole range of brightnesses into a single image. So certain sensors are better at that than others. Larger sensors, as in this camera, or newer sensors, these things get better over time the same way microchips, right? Sure. As CPUs get better. But ultimately, physics is the limiting factor, right? So we go bigger, we have bigger photo sites that can collect more photons, and that gives you an advantage. So that's one of the advantages of going to medium format over, say, full frame or crop sensor, or for, you know, 4/3 center.
Lift that camera up, Megan. See if it's appropriate for.
Yeah.
It's big.
It's like it's. I thought.
Nice.
And this is the lightest, smallest lens that I could have on this.
Wow.
I mean, the thing is that everything in photography is a trade-off, right? I get exceptional quality, but as we were saying when we were in your office taking pictures, you know, you were saying, I thought about doing it, but people said your technique has to be perfect in order to get the most out of it.
This is why I didn't get a medium format camera. That and the fact that it's a $9,000 camera.
Yeah.
But I bought expensive cameras before.
You have more than $9,000 worth of cameras.
Yes, I am one of those people who foolishly thinks a better camera will make me a better photographer.
Right.
You'd think I'd have learned by now.
Yeah.
But somebody told me, probably Trey Ratcliffe, don't get a medium format because your technique has to be perfect.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any defect, any shake, any movement will be seen.
Yes, right. Of course, there's so much information in there that shrink it down and it still looks just as good as your smaller thing. Yeah. But if you want to get the most out of it, absolutely. I mean, you got to use strobes, or you got to use a tripod, you got to be critical focus, this kind of thing. And the larger the sensor, the shorter the depth of field, right? So like less stuff's in focus. This lens wide open on your eyeballs, your eyelashes are out of focus, right? It's like, you know, so this is a problem. For a lot of people.
Portrait.
Sure.
Let's start with not necessarily a camera like this, but an interchangeable lens camera. What focal length is good? And now you've raised an interesting issue with aperture.
Sure.
Because sometimes when Apple's portrait mode on its iPhone, the whole thing that made it portrait mode is the background's out of focus. That means a shallow depth of field.
And what they're doing is they're just trying to figure out where the person is, right? And they're blurring the background, right?
But a lot of times when you see a portrait and you say that looks pro, what you're really saying is, well, the person's in focus and the background's out of focus.
Yeah. Or at least that's the shorthand version of what makes a good portrait in the world.
Right.
That guy's a pro.
It looks like a pro. It looks professional
exactly,
to me, like the average eye, when you look at it on your phone.
A wide open aperture.
Yes, or a fast lens, as we call it in the business, right? And using that fast lens as close to wide as possible. You have all the same problems of focus that we were just talking about. A lot of people talk about the idea of a portrait lens, right? A longer lens, like an 85 or a 120, right? Like, because it flattens perspective a little bit. So if somebody's got a little big nose or that kind of thing, right?
Wide angle, everybody's noses look big. In fact, camera phones are wide angle. You get big noses.
Right.
Yeah. See? I've been trying to explain that to you.
Right. Which is
Megan and I have the biggest schnozzes on TV.
Which is the problem that a lot of people have with taking portraits with phones, right? Is that you generally have to get pretty close up. Right. Which is the new feature, it's like a 50mm lens equivalent in the new iPhones. The thing about it is that I personally, as a portrait photographer, have been doing this for going on 12, 15 years. I don't use a lot of portrait lenses. I don't use a lot of long lenses. I'll use wider lenses and just get more of the scene in the shot.
Okay.
Right? So I'm not shooting up close on anything. I could shoot up close on this, my friend Bun eating noodles. He's a executive chef at a restaurant.
But the story going on around
is the environment around them, right?
Yeah.
Environmental portraiture to me is more about the space around them than it is even the person in the space.
I love that. Look, it's a mermaid.
That wasn't, no digital effects were.
No, actually, she's a mermaid. It's true. And that's her real hair. Yeah, right. But a lot of people think, oh, portrait, it's going to be a tight headshot, and that's fine. But to me, you get something a lot more interesting if you back up, right? So that's like the equivalent of a 35mm on a full frame sensor. That shot.
Do you do a lot of post production, a lot of Lightroom, Photoshop?
I am a big Photoshop guy, yeah. Almost anything I do touches Photoshop at some point. I rarely, if ever, finish stuff in Lightroom, or I use Capture One with the new camera.
Love this.
But for example,
do you make the color pop?
Yeah, a little bit. But even that shot was a flash bounced off the ceiling.
Wow.
That's all the lighting in that shot. It's not a big giant softbox. It's nothing fancy. Sometimes you could do a lot with a little, you know. And I mean, the trick and I actually just grew a tree in this guy's house for this shot.
You know, I want that house. That's a great idea.
Yeah, it's a nice place in my neighborhood in Brooklyn.
Yeah, Brooklyn, all sorts of things happen.
Yeah.
Do you
a tree grows in Brooklyn. I read
exactly,
the book.
Yes.
Do you ever shoot in film?
I do. 35mm film, medium format, large format film. The thing is that for commercial work, they need it yesterday, right? Or they need it today. It used to be that you could take your slides down and an hour later go pick them up, because especially in, say, New York or LA, that was the industry, right? Go shoot, run it off, it comes back after lunch. Nowadays, it's a day or 2 days to get stuff filmed, and you don't have time, and then you have to scan. And honestly, there was a point at which the quality of film, both the dynamic range and the color and the resolution, were so much better for film. This camera, you would need, honestly, a 4x5 view camera to get the level that I'm getting out of this thing.
51 megapixels. You said what the dynamic range is on this?
They say 14.5 stops, something like that, right?
That's more than the eye. I mean, that's remarkable, right?
Which is great when you take these files into, say, Capture One or Lightroom, it's silly putty, right? I mean, you're pulling stuff out of where it's completely black, you're pulling it up. When it's highlights, you're pulling it back. But again, the right tool for the right job. I don't carry this camera around all day. It weighs 6 pounds, 8 pounds. You got
an iPhone?
I have a phone. It's this or this. These are my two. These are my two cameras, right?
No point and shoot. This is you go straight.
Nothing
to the
in between. I bought them and then I use them and then I end up saying, you know what? I don't use it enough, so I sell it.
Give us some tips for getting better iPhone portraits.
Well, iPhone portraits. I mean, I would say keep it simple, right? Bring somebody next to a window. It's all about the lighting, trying to get nice, soft lighting, right?
Single point lighting from the side.
Exactly.
It really looks nice.
Right. It worked for the masters. It's going to work for you.
Right.
Interestingly enough, a lot of people say, oh, well, you're going to have to fill a little bit from the other side. A lot of people use reflectors and all this kind of stuff. You can get a piece of whiteboard from the hobby store. Right. Or even as a friend of mine went and shot some CEO a few years ago, and he came in and he didn't have anything with him. Guy held up a newspaper on the other side. It's white enough, right? It's enough to just bounce stuff in there. Right. But really, great portraits are about trying to get the person comfortable. So, that's step number one. If you get that, some nice soft lighting, getting the color right, you're 90% of the way there.
Yeah. Bill Wadman, where can we see more of your work?
You can go to BillWadman.com. You can follow me Instagram and Twitter at Bill Wadman. I'm doing a daily portrait project right now.
Oh, neat. There's Joko. I love Jonathan Colton.
At Wadman365. I'm doing a daily portrait, which is why I shot you today.
Am I one of your days?
You will be today's portrait, Wadman365 on Instagram. And I do a couple podcasts on taking pictures on 5x5.
Nice.
On Dan Benjamin's network. I've been doing for 5 years with my friend Jeffrey Sidoris. And I do one called Ask Bill and Dan. It's sort of like your Tech Guy podcast, but for photo stuff.
Awesome.
So Ask Bill and Dan, so check those out.
That's great.
All right.
Great network. Well, it's very nice to meet you, Bill. Thank
Pleasure.
you. And I'll be following your Instagram.
Okay.
What is it again?
Wadman365.
WADMAN 365.
That's it.
So I can see myself.
There it is.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.